All of us reach a point in time where we are depleted and need to somehow find a way to reignite the fire within. But how do we spark that flame? Welcome to Reignite Resilience, where we will venture into the heart of the human spirit. We'll discuss the art of reigniting our passion and strategies to stoke our enthusiasm. And now, here are your hosts, Natalie Davis and Pamela Cass.
And the kids are definitely watching, and they're paying attention too. And that's one thing I like to share with parents too, is especially with books like this, not just my books, but any of these kind of bigger topic books, you may feel like you're reading them and reading them and reading them, and it's not sinking through, or you may start practicing the skills and it's not sinking through, but eventually you'll have a moment where it's like, they are paying attention. They are listening. We try really hard when we have moments of dysregulation, like, we're human. My husband and I, sometimes we yell, even though we don't want to. And we always come back after the fact and we sit down with our girls, get down at their level. We say, I'm sorry I yelled at you. I shouldn't have responded that way. It wasn't appropriate. It has nothing to do with how much I love you. We do the bonding and the reconnecting. And we never even really did it to teach them anything. We really were doing it just to reconnect and make sure that our bond was still strong. And then we had a moment where my 3-year-old yelled at me. I don't remember why. She's 3. It could have been anything. And she went back to her room and I went back to doing whatever I was doing. And about 5 minutes later, she came back out. She was like, "Mommy, I'm sorry I yelled at you. I was mad and I shouldn't have yelled. I'm sorry." And it was just like this, one of those moments where it's like, she is paying attention. Like, it is sinking in. She is getting it. And even at 3, it was awesome.
Yeah.
Incredible.
That's so beautiful. And to think that a 3-year-old understands the importance of that continued bond, the relationship, really showing up and taking accountability for actions, behavior, reaction, whatever it was. And apparently she took the time in her room to process through the emotions that she was feeling as well. That's a lot. That is a lot.
I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in her room as she was like processing through what had just happened. Yeah, that would have been
I'd also love to put her in front of some business owners so that they can take lessons from the 3-year-old.
Yes. I could see you even doing a emotional intelligence adult children's book for owners, like managers, leaders. I mean, talk about emotional intelligence. It's like and I think that's a huge topic as we're going into a place where people are leading Gen Z and millennials. I think that emotional intelligence is going to be a very hot topic over the next few years, especially coming off of the pandemic too, where everybody was isolated from each other. And so a lot of emotions that are out there. So you're going to have just this whole series of books. I love it.
Cannot wait for them.
Yes. Every generation.
Exactly. Well, and I think if you bring that back to connecting with kids, especially kids that are going through school, like school age children, you have their emotional intelligence and them really figuring out and navigating everything with their peers. And then when they get to a certain age, it's then like understanding, oh, wait, I've got to engage with adults as well when they're connecting with their teachers. And Nicole, you shared the story of, well, why didn't that person say hello to me? That's very quickly what students do. It's like, well, my teacher didn't say hi to me, so I am probably going to fail this class, right? And that's they immediately go into that space, but then they progress fast forward to adults where they're leaders or team leaders or CEOs of companies. And again, you have that multi-line of relationships that develops. And if you're not aware or intentional, you could misinterpret a lot of interactions or comments or emojis for the wrong thing.
Right? Yeah. And that coming back and reconnecting and being human and being okay with making a mistake too. Like that, I feel like is missing in so much leadership right now. Is being able to say, I made a mistake. And that's okay. We all make mistakes. And then reconnecting and fixing our mistakes, because it doesn't feel like that happens. It's like, I'm going to fight till the end and say I'm right, even if I know I'm wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. We see that a lot.
Unnecessary desire for perfection,
Yeah.
or at least the perception of perfection,
Mhm.
which that's detrimental to everyone.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Incredible. So would you share with us at the very beginning, you talked about you were going through a period of time in your career where you're kind of not in control of your emotions. Would you mind sharing that story with our listeners so that they can kind of understand, like, what was it that you went through that caused you to then decide to write a children's book?
Yeah. So there were a few things happening at that period of time. So it probably all started about 8 years ago, the bulk of it, when I'd had my first daughter. And so as you mentioned in my intro, I work in wildland fire,
Yes.
which is a very male dominated field.
Hmm.
And there was a lot going on, and not just where I worked, but in the field in general, of, some harassment issues were coming up. I was dealing with being a woman among all of these men and having different standards. I was getting passed up for promotions, not due to skills related to the job, but because of like the hierarchy that they had gone in operations, if that makes sense. So like it was a job that had nothing to do with that, but because they'd worked their way up on this side, and I became very bitter.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where we had to get some lawyers involved, and I didn't like who I was becoming. And so I decided, like, okay, well, you have two choices. You can let this control you and dictate what happens to you for the rest of your life, or you can start working on yourself and figuring out how you're going to change and what you're going to do differently. And through that, a lot of things kind of came. I started studying the emotional intelligence stuff for myself. I started seeing a lot of different things differently. So like, I remember I went to this women in leadership conference around the same time here in Boise, and one of the speakers was talking about the wage gap between men and women. And I'm a federal employee, and so we don't have a technical wage gap, right? They're not legally, they can't pay men and women differently because we're on a GS scale, or a graded scale. And yet I started remembering how I was treated when I would do like saw training and cutting, here I was trying to become a sawyer, cutting down the trees, doing really good work, and then coming back and being told, well, you're never going to run a saw because you're a woman. But then the hiring practices to get hired into that next level, you have to be a sawyer, you have to run a saw. And so it was kind of these pieces that I was picking up all over and putting together. And then the reason I keep bringing up that my first daughter was born was because it was kind of like a light bulb moment. I was like, okay, I've let all of this roll off my back. I've done all the things that they say I need to do. I've manned up, I've gone forward, I've ignored it. Like, and then I would look at her and I would think, but what do I want for you? And I was like, if you want to be a firefighter someday, I don't want you to have to live through this. Yeah. And the only way you're not going to live through it is if I do something now to try to change it. So I started speaking up. I started doing a lot of work in the areas of harassment and some other areas, and all of that kind of led in together and made this big ball of stuff, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Oh, it absolutely does.
Well, and it's so incredible because, most people would be in a situation like that and they would not say, let me work on myself. It's typically we go to somebody else's fault, they're going to pay for this. And so I love that you did the deep work and focused on yourself first, and then you also did the other stuff. So I just think what a great role model for your kids.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Incredible.
Nicole, I think the other piece of that, like coming to the chapter and season in life where you start to write the book, having a young child, I mean, that's, a mom of a little one, being able to carve out the time and just, I think, the mental capacity to put your thoughts together to create a book. What was that experience like? Because I can only imagine that the starting point for it, and really that desire to create something different for your daughter is one thing, but then going down this path of becoming an author and really shaping the narrative for hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of lives in the future, that's huge and that's different. I think that's a different weight that you're carrying. What was that like for you?
It has been a very interesting ride and journey. So like you said, I had decided I wanted to write this book for my kids. And I knew that I wanted to, if I was going to write it, like I wanted it to be good and I wanted it to look professional. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to put all this time and energy and realistically all this money to get an illustrator and an editor and a formatter and all that into it, then I'm going to publish it and see how many kids I can help with it. And the way that some of the ideas came to me have been so random and weird. I remember I was doing some sort of meditation, and I wasn't even thinking about the children's book. I knew, like in the back of my head, I knew that I wanted to do some sort of an animal, probably a stuffed animal to talk to Izzy, but I hadn't decided what. And for whatever reason, during this meditation, and it just kind of like a penny for your thoughts. And I was like, Penny, her name should be Penny. And I was like, I love it. And then I can't remember the term. I need to look it up, but I like it when sounds go together. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, it's got to be like another P. So Penny, I went through like Penny Poodle. I was like, I don't like that. I don't like Penny Poodle. And I think I even had like Penny Possum. I was like, possums are kind of weird and scary. And so that's kind of how we got to Panda, was because I was like, okay, it's still kind of like your squishy teddy bear because it's like the bear format, but it's a panda. And so that's how Penny Panda was born. And then the idea for the book, the first book kind of came, I knew I wanted to talk about possibilities. I knew I wanted to dive into being able to see the different possibilities. And at this time, my second child had been born, my second daughter. So I was starting to see some of that sibling rivalry. Not rivalry. That's probably not the right way to put it. Jealousy. Yeah. And more than one time, my daughter would be like, well, you can't spend time with me because you're spending it with Maddie. So you've got to love Maddie more. So I'd heard this a couple times. And so I was like, okay, I know I want to do something about possibilities. I want to do something about mom and dad and, love. And so I can't remember exactly how it all came together, but I was like, okay, Christmas, Penny will be the gift. And part of the gift is this gift of possibility, because it really is a gift when we can learn to think about things differently and look for all these possibilities. So that's how the story kind of came to be. And then I wrote it. And as any probably first time writer does, I thought, this is awesome. And perfect. Don't need any feedback. Don't need anything. And so I hired an editor. She provided some feedback, which was a little brutal for someone who thought it was perfect. So went through that humbling process and worked with her. And I've learned so much. So the first editor I used, she was great, but she didn't specialize in children's books. And so the first book is 1,200 words, which is really long. I came to learn for a children's book. So like the second book is right around 600 words. Okay. And so there were things like that I've kind of learned between the two books. Like, okay, get an editor who specializes in children's books, get a lot more feedback and critique ahead of time. And the more of that you get, the easier it becomes to take. So I encourage everyone to get feedback and critique from the beginning. But that process and that journey has been really interesting. And I have learned so much. I've definitely gone from someone who was like, oh, it's easy to write a book and publish a book and get it out there and sell it to millions of people, to someone who's like, oh my gosh, this is really, really hard.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is why
That's the
not everyone
reality.
does
Yes.
it. Yeah. Wow. But what a great message. I mean, I don't know. This is why I'm so excited that you're going to keep hopefully writing and looking at an adult version, because I just think that this is probably one of the biggest things in the world right now, people not having emotional intelligence. So we don't even know how to interact with people. We go to judgment instead of empathy. And yeah, we don't even know how to process our own emotions. And so we end up throwing our emotions on other people. And so, yeah.
And we blame our emotions. And
Absolutely.
that's part of it I don't like either. I hear people being like, well, yeah, I was angry, so it's okay. No, it's okay to feel anger, but
Yeah.
that doesn't make your behavior okay.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
yeah, that was one thing I wanted to avoid with my kids too, because I've seen a few kids that throw these tantrums and they're like, well, it wasn't me, it was my emotions. No, see, they're part of you. They're a
Mhm.
small part of you. So you have to learn to rein those guys in.
Yeah. And be in control of them. Wow.
Well, and the way that I think that our society has really found a way to just dismiss it and make it less of an opportunity for us to dive deeper into ourselves is that we come up with funny, like it's through comedic relief, right? Or, let's say the shirts or the memes that are, forgive me for what I said when I was hangry. I didn't know, it's
Okay.
like, and now I've had something to eat. But
Yeah.
I mean, there's some truth to that. There's a lot of truth to that,
A lot.
coming from a person who typically gets angry. So
Right.
there's some truth to that. But again, it's how are you going to behave? How are you going to show up? And then I think it's also the receiver of those emotions as well. And I think that that's where the possibilities really it's huge. It's, you don't know where that person is coming from, what they're going through, what they just experienced right before connecting or engaging with you. So enter that with a clean slate, right? So that's or all of the possibilities and let people process it.
Yeah.
I
For
love
sure.
it. I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I wish I had it as a kid, because as you were talking about it, I thought about a lot of my childhood outbursts that I've had, and there were some big ones, but we don't need to talk about it because this is not therapy. So,
It's kind of funny that you mentioned that. So I talked about how the first book came to be, but most of the other ideas I've had have come from my own therapy sessions where I'm
oh
like,
yes,
okay, I am struggling with this, or like I can't handle this. And then it's like, so what would I tell myself if I were my kids, or if I were, someone else? And it's been very therapeutic.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Oh,
That's
that's
what I imagined. I figured as much.
oh, I love
I
it.
love that. But we all do it in different
Oh
ways,
yeah.
right? I
Totally.
mean, that's how Pam and I found ourselves here with a podcast.
Right.
It's,
Pretty much.
That's awesome.
I love it. So can you share with us, what can parents do, to help their kids kind of build that social emotional intelligence, other than the book? Because we know we've got this great tool of the book. Are there other things that they can do?
So the number one tip I have for parents is to utilize both books and movies and television
Okay.
to start the conversations. The
Mhm.
reason that I really like this is because it creates a very safe space, because we're not talking about the child's emotions.
Yeah.
Anytime we start talking, or at least what I've found with my girls, is anytime I start talking to them about how they're feeling or they're responding to their emotions, it's still really emotionally charged. And so they can't get into that logic,
Yeah.
like mind space.
Yeah.
So I found that's not a good time to have the conversations. But I will take, and I'm a huge Disney fan, I will take movies like Frozen, Elemental, the Inside Out movies, which I really like because they kind of
Yeah.
are also very similar to the Emotion Ninjas. And I will take those and kind of break them down and ask questions. Like, I remember there's this scene in Frozen 2 that hit me as an adult too. And this was right around when COVID was happening. And somebody asked Olaf, the snowman, they were like, "Are you okay? Is everything okay?" And he was like, "No, we're not okay, but that's okay." And I was just like, oh my gosh, like that is so brilliant. Like, so I actually created a resource. I need to adapt it so I can use it for something else. Then was using Frozen 2 to talk to your kids about COVID. And so I would take different elements from the movie and so that they could talk to their kids about it. But really you can take and do that for almost any situation. And like there's a song in that movie where Anna is like the next right step or the next best step. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, parents, like listen to this, because this is an opportunity to say, we all feel overwhelmed sometimes. Sometimes things can feel so big that you just don't know what to do. So just remember your Disney song, like the next best step. Like, what's the next step that you do? And then you just take the next step and the next step. And so that I love. Now I can't remember the name. Oh, Encanto. There are so many moments in that movie. Like I remember we were at the theater, and at the end we had 3 generations, my mom, myself, and my daughter, and we were all crying. Wow. And I was like, okay, this movie obviously has like an impact. And there are so many moments that you can break down in that movie and talk about what is the character feeling? What are they going through? How would you feel if you were the only one in the family that didn't have a magical power? Like there's just so many opportunities. And then kids start to recognize when other people are feeling these different emotions. They start to empathize. They start to try to figure out how they would feel in that situation. And like I said at the beginning, it's all in this safe environment because it's not something that they're actually experiencing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Like just a layer of detachment, right? Like they're separate.
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. And I have found that with Disney movies over the years, they are so much deeper than just the movie. If you were to dig in a little bit to them, there's so many messages inside of them.
So many.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could do a whole podcast with you on the emotional elements I take out of Disney movies.
I'm sad because I don't have any kids that go to Disney movies anymore, because I was we went to every Disney movie. So Encanto I've not seen yet, but Frozen
So good.
2, all the things. I've seen all of those. So I just need to start going by myself, I guess.
That's it.
Or get Disney Plus.
Yes.
I had it. Nobody was watching it. So I'm like, all right, I'll just go to them.
Now you've got to resubscribe because you're working on your social emotional intelligence. That's
absolutely.
I feel it's warranted.
For me. I can write it off as a business expense.
That's exactly it.
There it is.
I love that. Well, Nicole, do you have any pointers, tips, or advice for our listeners, whether they're in a parental or guardian role, and even for our younger listeners? We have a couple of younger listeners that tune in every so often. But what advice do you have, as I think we're all constantly working on our own social emotional intelligence? What tips do you have for us?
My biggest tip, and I've already kind of talked about this, but is just give yourself grace and be compassionate towards yourself, because there are so many things that go into all of it, right? Like our emotions are not separate from our body. If you're not sleeping, if you're not eating, if you're not getting your exercise, all of those things impact your ability to stay regulated. And so you just have to be okay and understand that you're not always going to be at your best, and then work on those reconnections afterwards.
I love that. Oh, that's
we have a guest.
My dog.
Our furry friends are joining us, so it's good.
Yes.
Perfect.
The family just got home and she heard the garage door.
Sorry. No worries.
Totally
and Nicole, how can our listeners find you?
Yes, the best way is my website, which is NicoleOkeAuthor.com. And the one nice thing about having a unique last name like Oke is that there aren't very many of us. Yeah. So even if you just Google Nicole Oke, Oke, it's pretty much me that'll pop up. I have some freebies on there, some activity books. The Ninja Mindfulness exercise that you mentioned is on the website. And there's also some discounted links to where you can purchase the books. And then, of course, Instagram, Facebook, search for Nicole Oke Author and you'll find me there too.
Yeah, I know that I'm going to be purchasing several of these books for my kids that have kids, for, grandkids. And Yeah, I'm so excited, and we will definitely keep in touch with you, because when you come out with that adult version, I'm giving it to all my friends.
Yes.
I love
They
it.
all just need to get their stuff together.
I was going
Right?
to say, no one take it personal. She's getting it
No,
for
we love you
everyone.
guys. It's going to everyone, all the
That's
people.
awesome. Well,
Oh my
thank you so
goodness.
much.
Yeah, absolutely, Nicole. It has been an absolute pleasure. We want to thank you for taking the time out to share your work, your journey, your passion, your purpose with us and our listeners. We're so grateful for that. We will make sure that we put all of your contact information in the show notes so folks can find you. And if you all are looking for more information on what's happening in the world of Reignite Resilience, you can head on over to reigniteresilience.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram. I feel like I just went into the vortex and came back. I don't know what happened there.
You glitched a little bit, but your voice was fine.
That's it. Exactly. All right. Well, you can find us at reigniteresilience.com. And if you have not already done so, make sure that you subscribe to our weekly Think Letter. It is jam-packed with additional information about our episodes and our guests, and Pam and my takeaways and additional tools and resources to help you continue to ignite the fire within. So until next time, we'll see you all soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for joining us today on the Reignite Resilience podcast. We hope you had some aha moments and learned a few new real-life ideas to fuel the flames of passion. Please subscribe on your favorite streaming platform, like or download your favorite episodes, and of course, share with your friends and family. We look forward to seeing you again next time on Reignite Resilience.